They say a town can't vanish overnight. I used to believe that too, until the morning dispatch called me in. It was 4:17 a.m. when my phone rang. I wasn't even a deputy anymore. I'd handed in my badge 5 years ago, traded the cruiser for a battered pickup, and started drinking my coffee without worrying about blood on the dashboard. But something in the dispatcher's voice, quieter than usual, hollow like an empty barn, made me listen. "Ray," she said, "it's Barlow. We've lost contact. Phones are dead. No one's responding." Barlow was a 2-hour drive from my cabin, tucked up near the base of the Bitterroot Mountains. Population 763. Church, gas station, diner. Nothing fancy, but it was real, and real things don't just disappear. I took the drive with the windows down. Cold air knifed through the cab. The closer I got, the weirder it felt. Fog crept low over the blacktop, thick as smoke, refusing to burn off with the rising sun. Not a single car passed me. Even the birds were quiet. I hit the "Welcome to Barlow" sign just after 6. The place looked intact. No signs of struggle, no wreckage, no fire. But also, no people. Main Street was a ghost street. Cars sat abandoned in parking spaces. One still idled near the grocery store, driver's door open, keys in the ignition. The windows of the diner were steamed up, but inside, untouched plates of breakfast sat on the tables. Coffee steamed, pancakes cooled. Something had emptied this town like water poured from a boot. I stepped out of my truck and the silence hit me, heavy, pressing, wrong. I reached for my sidearm without thinking, and then I heard it, faint, distant, the sound of a child laughing. The laughter echoed once, then faded so fast I questioned if I'd heard it at all. Barlow was blanketed in a pale mist that hadn't lifted since dawn. It clung to the buildings, curling under doors like it had fingers. As I walked slowly down Main Street, my boots crunching gravel that sounded too loud, like the world around me was muffled. No wind, no insects, no movement. I stopped at the diner first. Inside, the air was warm and smelled of bacon grease and burnt toast. Coffee pots hissed on burners. Half-empty mugs steamed beside untouched plates. Someone had dropped a purse in the middle of the floor. The pages of a menu slowly turned like a ghost was reading it. I called out, "Hello?" But my voice didn't echo. It just vanished into the stillness. The fog outside had thickened by the time I stepped back onto the street. I made my way to the sheriff's office 2 blocks down. I half expected to see Mike Garvey at the front desk, chewing sunflower seeds and giving me that crooked grin of his. But the office was dark. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no bullet holes, just stillness. The radio crackled softly on the desk, hissing with static like it was trying to speak. I leaned in, adjusted the frequency, but nothing came through, just white noise, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Then came the smell, copper and rot, like meat gone sour. I followed it to the holding cell and back. The bars were locked, the lights flickering. Something dark streaked the inside wall, not blood, something blacker, and written in shaky red letters, smeared across the concrete. It came when the sky split open. The laughter returned, closer this time. I stood in front of that message for a long time. It came when the sky split open. What the hell did that even mean? I touched the wall. The red smear was still tacky, fresh. That meant someone had been here recently. Maybe someone was still here, hiding or watching. I stepped back into the hallway and listened. Nothing but the crackle of the radio and the faint hum of dying fluorescent lights. I opened every office, every broom closet, every drawer in the station. No signs of Garvey, no sign of anyone. Just a faint buzzing in the air like a television left on in a distant room. I walked back outside, hands still on my holstered pistol. The fog was so thick now I could barely see the truck. My breath clouded in front of me, but the air wasn't cold anymore. It felt wrong, like the humidity before a lightning strike, but heavier, charged. That's when I looked up. The sky above Barlow didn't match the horizon. I don't mean it was just cloudy or overcast. It looked wrong, like 2 skies stitched together imperfectly. There was a faint line overhead, pulsing like a vein in the clouds. It shimmered faintly, bending light like heat waves over asphalt. That's when I noticed. No sun. It was daylight, but there was no visible sun in the sky, just a dull gray glow. Then I heard it again. Laughter. Not playful this time. Hysterical. Twisted. I spun around, pistol drawn. Nothing. But as the fog parted, I saw a figure down the street, small, standing perfectly still, a child, barefoot, smiling, and her eyes, black, glassy, and hollow. I called out to her. "Hey, are you okay? Where's your family?" She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me with those black, lifeless eyes. I took a step forward. The fog shifted between us like something alive, slithering through the street. She tilted her head, slow and unnatural, like a bird studying roadkill. "Sweet hair." "Hey, it's all right. I'm not going to hurt you," I said. Still nothing. I moved closer, my boots crunching gravel, finger off the trigger but close enough, 20 feet away now. Her dress was white, stained with something brown and crusted. Mud, maybe. Or worse. Her arms hung limply at her sides. She was breathing, but shallow, barely noticeable. And then, as I reached 10 feet, she opened her mouth. It wasn't words. It was a sound. A high, mechanical hum, like a broken speaker squealing. Her jaw hung unnaturally wide, far too wide, and that sound poured out of her like it didn't belong to a human at all. I stumbled back, hand clamped over my ear. The fog around her pulsed with the noise, like it was reacting, thickening, folding inward. Then she began to walk backward, still staring at me, her feet gliding across the pavement. Back into the mist. Gone. Silence again. I stood there, heart pounding, ears ringing. Something was terribly wrong here. I turned to get back to my truck and froze. There were handprints on the windows. Dozens of them, small, child-sized, pressed against the glass from the inside. I hadn't seen them when I arrived. They were smeared, as if someone, or something, had tried to claw its way out. That's when the radio in the truck crackled to life. A whisper. "Deputy Dawson, you never left." The whisper paralyzed me. I stood there, frozen in the street, staring at my truck like it had grown fangs. "You never left." The voice was soft, genderless, distorted like it had traveled through too many miles of wire, but it knew my name, and it wasn't a question. I climbed into the cab, heart hammering. The radio was off. No power light, no frequency display. I hadn't turned it on. Hell, the truck itself wasn't even running anymore. I turned the key. Nothing. Dead. No clicks, no attempt to crank. Just silence. The fog thickened around me like a blanket. I could barely see the storefronts across the street. My side mirror was fogged, but I could just make out a shape moving behind the truck. Too tall to be the girl. I got out, slowly, gun raised. No one there. But there were wet footprints on the pavement, barefoot, adult-sized, leading toward the alley beside the bakery. I followed them. The alley stank of mold and something worse, like iron and wet leaves. The fog curled at the ground, swirling unnaturally around my boots. The footprints stopped at a brick wall. No door, no ladder, just solid brick. Then I noticed something scratched into the mortar. Dozens of names. First names, some familiar, others foreign. At the bottom, freshly carved in trembling lines. Raymond Dawson. I stepped back. My name hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. Behind me, something exhaled. Hot breath grazed my neck. I spun and fired. The gunshot echoed like thunder. Nothing. Just a hole in the fog and the smell of burned gunpowder. But I swear, I heard something giggle before it faded again. Whatever had taken Barlow wasn't gone. It was waiting. And now, it knew I was here. I didn't run. I should have. But instead, I walked back out to Main Street, trying to breathe through the knot in my chest. The fog had lifted slightly, just enough to see the buildings again. Though, everything looked older, as if the paint had peeled and the wood had grayed in the span of an hour. I spotted something that stopped me cold. A house. Right there, wedged between the hardware store and the barbershop. Except that house hadn't been there before. I grew up 30 miles from Barlow, knew it like the back of my hand. That house, with its sagging roof, blackened shingles, and crooked porch, wasn't part of this town. But there it sat, as if it had always belonged. The windows were boarded up, but a dim orange light flickered behind them like firelight. Something about it made my skin crawl. I stepped closer. The air around the house was warmer, buzzing faintly like static. The wood on the porch creaked beneath my boots, but I didn't stop. I had to know. The front door wasn't locked. I pushed it open, half expecting dust and rot. What I got instead was freshness. Candles burned on the mantel. A kettle hissed on the stove. Photographs lined the walls, black and white portraits of blank-faced people, their eyes smudged or missing entirely. Then I saw the mirror in the hallway. I approached it, slowly. My reflection wasn't moving. I was frozen in glass, eyes wide, mouth open, gun still drawn. And then it smiled. Not me. It smiled. Behind my unmoving reflection, someone else stepped into frame. I turned around in real life, but the hallway was empty, except for the sound of the kettle screaming. The kettle screamed like it was alive, shrieking, metallic, painful. I bolted toward the kitchen, hand gripping my sidearm, but when I got there, the stove was off. No flame, no heat, and the kettle, ice cold to the touch. The sound had stopped the second I crossed the threshold. Every hair on my arms stood up. I backed away, scanning the kitchen, polished counters, spotless dishes in the sink, a bowl of apples that looked freshly picked. It was too clean, too staged. Like a set built to resemble someone's home, but missing the soul of the real thing. I turned back to the hallway and the mirror. My reflection was back to normal. No grin, no figure behind me. Just me, pale and sweating. Then I noticed the photos again, on the wall. They were changing. Where before the faces had been blurred or smudged, now they were sharpening, becoming clearer. And I recognized one. It was Sheriff Mike Garvey, standing with his wife and their boy, smiling. But their eyes, every one of them, were gone. Hollow black pits. A frame lower on the wall caught my attention. I crouched. My throat tightened. It was me. A younger version, maybe from my academy graduation. Except my face was wrong. The expression, twisted. Like someone had recreated my smile from memory and missed every detail that made it human. I reached out to touch the photo. The glass was warm. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I spun, raising my weapon. The hallway was empty again. But on the mirror, someone, or something, had scrawled a message in long, wet streaks of condensation. You belong here now. A door slammed upstairs, and slow, deliberate footsteps began descending the stairs. The steps were slow, heavy. Each one groaned through the frame of the old house, like the walls themselves were flinching. I backed into the kitchen, gun raised, pulse thudding in my ears. 4 steps. 5. 6. The creaky then grew louder, closer. I counted 12 steps, but the sound didn't stop. 13, 14, 15. It kept going, longer than the stairs should have been. Then silence. I peeked around the corner. The staircase was empty, but something had come down. I could feel it in the air, thick and charged, like a thunderstorm about to crack. The hallway light flickered, and the temperature dropped. Frost crept along the wallpaper, curling like veins. My breath came out in visible clouds. I took a step forward, careful, scanning every inch. That's when I noticed the front door, wide open. Fog spilled into the house like smoke. Beyond it, the street had changed. No longer Main Street. The town outside was gone. Now it was forest. Dead trees, blackened trunks, dirt paths spiraling into the dark. The house had moved, or the town had warped. I slammed the door shut, locked it, backed away. The lights flickered again. Then every bulb burst at once. I crouched in darkness, breathing hard, heart rattling. Somewhere above me, the kettle began to whistle again, except I hadn't turned it back on. I stumbled toward the back door, desperate for air, for space, for anything normal. I flung it open and stepped out. onto a porch that hadn't been there, and surrounding it for miles in every direction was the same endless forest. And between the trees, faces, dozens of them, peeking out, watching, waiting. I shut the door and whispered to no one. What the hell is this place? Something whispered back. Home. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The house seemed to breathe at night. The walls pulsed, the floorboards shifted underfoot, warping with each step like they weren't made of wood anymore. More like cartilage, soft, alive. I tried every door, every window, no way out. Every exit open to that nightmare forest, to those pale, silent faces in the trees. They never moved, never blinked, just watched. By dawn, or what passed for it, I was losing my grip. That's when the static returned. Faint at first, like radio fuzz, distant and searching. Then louder, crackling from nowhere and everywhere at once. I followed the sound, stumbling back into the living room. The TV was on, except it wasn't plugged in. Black and white static fizzled across the screen, but behind it, shapes moved, shadowy figures flickering between frames, too fast to fully see. I stared, entranced. Then it stopped, and a man appeared, not in the room, on the screen. He was tall, thin, in a deputy's uniform, not mine, older, tattered badge, face obscured by blur and snow. He raised a hand and pointed, directly at me. The screen buzzed violently. Then a voice came through, warbled and broken. Ray, we all made the same mistake. We stayed. The image twisted, the man's face contorting into static. Then screams, dozens layered over each other, growing louder and louder until I yanked the power cord from the wall. Silence. I backed away, breathing hard. On the floor where the TV sat was a photo. Me again. Same smudged face. But this time, my eyes were gone, scratched out. Underneath, scribbled in black ink. You're part of it now. Then, from behind me, a voice whispered in my own ear. You've always been. I didn't turn around, not right away. The voice, my voice, still echoed in my skull. You've always been. I gripped the photo in my shaking hand and backed into the hallway. The mirror was G1. In its place was a tall wooden cabinet I hadn't seen before, carved with symbols I didn't recognize, twisted loops, jagged crosses, a circle split by a blackened line. Something compelled me to open it. Inside sat a thick, leather-bound book. Heavy, reeking of mold and smoke. The cover bore no title, only a handprint, burned into the leather, fingers splayed unnaturally wide. I opened it. The pages were yellowed, brittle, covered in names, hundreds, maybe thousands, each name written in the same black, jagged script. Some I recognized. Mike Garvey, Elsie Burnham from the diner, even Old Man Ketter from the gas station. All Barlow residents, all missing. I flipped further, hands trembling. And there it was. Raymond Dawson. My name sat near the bottom of the final page, not written, but carved deep into the paper, fresh, bleeding. I tried to tear the page out, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled, cursed, even tried to burn it with a candle from the mantel. The flame went out the second it touched the paper. Then, slowly, the names above mine began to fade, one by one, turning to ash and vanishing off the page. But mine remained, burned in place. That's when I heard it again, the laughter. Not just one voice this time, dozens, children, women, men, all laughing in unison from somewhere deep within the house. The walls trembled with the sound. I slammed the book shut, and the laughing stopped, instantly. But on the inside of the cabinet door, scratched with fingernails, were 3 final words. It remembers you. I needed answers. Something about that book. It felt old, ancient, like it had roots deeper than any one town. I shoved it into my backpack, pushed through the door, and stepped out into the fog again. But the town was different. Again. Main Street was no longer abandoned. It was alive. Horses tied to posts, gas lamps lit, men in wide-brim hats walking with purpose, women in long dresses crossing dusty streets, a newspaper boy yelling something I couldn't quite hear. I blinked hard. This wasn't now. This was then. I stumbled forward, dizzy. The buildings were newer, clean. The air smelled of wood smoke and manure. I passed the post office and saw a calendar nailed to the wall inside, October 3rd, 1903, over a century back. The town was showing me something. I stepped into the bar. The piano played softly. Patrons laughed. It all looked normal, until I looked closer. Their faces. Every single person's eyes were hollow, not missing, not black, just absent. Blank ovals where their eyes should be, like clay dolls waiting for features. The bartender turned toward me. His face was wet with tears, but he smiled anyway. "You're late," he said. "For what?" I asked. "The offering." The piano stopped. Every head turned to face me. I backed out, heart hammering, stumbling into the street. The sky above warped again, pulsing like a bruise. Thunder cracked, but no lightning came. I looked toward the church at the end of the block. Its steeple loomed high, far taller than it should have been, reaching past the clouds. And there, standing in the bell tower, was the little girl again, smiling, pointing at me. The townsfolk began to walk toward me, slow and silent. Time had peeled back, and I was standing in the moment Barlow died. They didn't speak as they approached. No footsteps, no voices, just the shuffle of boots and skirts over dirt. Silent faces, eyeless and sore. But slow, moving in perfect rhythm. I backed away toward the edge of town, but it didn't help. The street stretched, literally stretched. Each step I took widened the distance between me and escape, like the town was folding space, trapping me in the center. I turned and ran toward the church. The bell rang out once, long and deep, a sound that made my teeth ache. The townsfolk stopped, just froze in place, and the little girl in the bell tower disappeared. The church doors swung open as I reached them. Inside, the air was thick and warm. Candles lined the pews. The altar was bare, except for a stone basin filled with a thick, dark liquid. It smelled like rust and earth. A man stood beside it. His back was to me. He wore a deputy's coat. I knew that coat. I'd worn that exact one when I first got my badge. He turned slowly. It was me, older, paler, hollow eyes. He didn't speak. He just raised one hand and pointed to the basin. I shook my head. No, I'm not part of this. But I was lying. Some part of me had known, ever since I arrived. I'd felt the pull, the recognition. I took a step forward. Then the girl was behind the altar again, eyes still empty. Her mouth opened wide, unhinged like a snake, and the sound that came out was pure static. The church cracked, splintered. The floor beneath me collapsed. I fell through blackness, the screams of the town pouring in from above. And just before I lost consciousness, I heard the girl whisper, "You were always meant to stay." I woke up in dirt. Cold, wet, breathing dust and darkness. My arms ached. My gun was gone. The leather-bound book still hung heavy in my pack, but everything else felt stripped away, including time. There was no telling how long I'd been out. I sat up, coughing hard, and found myself in a tunnel, roughly cut, stone and clay packed tight. Wooden beams held up the ceiling, old and splintered. The air stank of rot and something sweet, like flowers left to die in a closed room. Somewhere ahead, a faint light pulsed red. I moved toward it, shuffling low, listening. Far behind me, something scraped, claws on stone. I didn't look back. The tunnel narrowed before opening into a chamber, round, carved walls covered in symbols that danced when I wasn't staring directly at them. At the center stood a stone altar, and above it, suspended in midair by nothing at all, floated a lantern made of bone and glass. It pulsed with that red glow. The walls around me whispered, not voices, but thoughts, echoes, guilt, names. Mike Garvey, Elsie Burnham, Raymond Dawson. It knew me, this place, this thing. I approached the lantern. It pulsed faster. The moment I touched it, the chamber screamed, stone grinding on stone, an impossible shriek of the earth itself. Visions hit me. People gathered in the church above, chanting, sacrificing one of their own, a ritual to seal something in beneath the town. A child, the girl, not a victim, a vessel. The townsfolk had imprisoned her, but not well enough. She wasn't just haunting Barlow. She was Barlow. The town hadn't disappeared. It had been devoured from the inside out, and I was now beneath its belly. The chamber throbbed like a living thing. With each pulse of the lantern's red glow, I felt something in the ground, a heartbeat. Deep and slow, thudding through the stone like the echo of something enormous, something buried in me, breathing. I backed away from the altar, but the air thickened like syrup. Every step became harder, like I was walking through molasses. The walls were closing in, or maybe I was shrinking. My skin crawled with the sensation of being watched from inside my own head. Then I saw her again, the girl. She stepped from the shadows behind the altar, barefoot and pale, wearing the same stained white dress. Her head tilted, her mouth slack, her eyes still pits of black glass. She didn't speak with her mouth. She spoke straight into me. They fed me lies. Her voice was everywhere, inside the stone, in the cracks of my teeth, behind my ribs. They built this place with fear, with blood. They made me a cage and called it holy. She walked closer. I couldn't move. Now I am the cage, and I am the key. I wanted to scream, but my mouth wouldn't open. My limbs trembled like I was being unraveled from the inside. She touched my chest with one cold finger. You carry the book. You carry the truth. The leather-bound journal burned hot against my spine. The girl leaned in. Her voice dropped to a whisper only my bones could hear. But truth has a price. Then suddenly, she shattered into black smoke and ash. The lantern above flared and exploded, plunging the chamber into flickering red light from cracks that began splitting through the walls. The ground shook violently, and somewhere far above, the bell in the church tower rang. The stone ceiling groaned above me, cracking like ice under pressure. I sprinted. The tunnel I'd come through had collapsed, replaced now by a slope of writhing dirt opening upward like a throat. The walls convulsed, bleeding red light from somewhere deep inside. And the heartbeat I'd felt earlier had grown faster, frantic, like prey cornered. No, like a predator waking up hungry. I climbed. The walls pulsed and shuddered under my grip, shedding dirt and moss. Something slick brushed my fingers, long, wet, and moving. I didn't look down. Behind me, I heard them again. Footsteps. Many, not running, just walking. Steady, patient, unhurried. And singing, a low, ancient hum, like a lullaby sung underwater, male and female voices, together, familiar. The townsfolk. I scrambled faster, every muscle burning, lungs raw. The tunnel narrowed and twisted as I clawed upward. Then, I saw it, a wooden hatch. I reached it, slammed my fists against the underside until the rusted latch gave way, and hauled myself out into cold, open air. Night, but not normal night. The sky boiled with bruised clouds. The moon was gone, and in its place, a jagged black rift cut across the heavens, pulsing with veins of red light. The same line I'd seen earlier above Barlow. Only now, it was wider. Open. I was in the woods again. Not just any woods, the woods outside town, but the trees were warped, twisted like they'd grown under pressure. I turned back to the hatch. It was gone. The ground had closed over it like a wound stitching itself shut. Then I heard the singing again. all around me. And just ahead, at the tree line, dozens of hollow-eyed townsfolk waited, smiling. And at the center, holding something in her arms, the girl, cradling the book. She held it like it was sacred. The book. Its leather skin pulsed faintly, as if it too had a heartbeat. The girl, expression, less, eyes void, cradled it gently, her thumbs brushing the burned handprint on the cover like a mother comforting a sick child. The townsfolk didn't move. They just watched. Every last one of them, Mike Garvey, Elsie Burnham, Old Ketter, even kids I remembered from patrol routes, stood beneath the trees. Their clothes were decades out of date, some torn or burned. Their faces smiled, but their eyes were holes. One by one, they raised their hands and pointed at me. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The girl opened the book. It flipped on its own, pages turning in a violent wind that came from nowhere. The forest remained still, not a branch stirring, yet the air around me howled with invisible force. The book stopped on a blank page, except for one word in blood-red ink: repent. Then came the voice. Not hers, not mine, something older. It came from the trees, from the sky, from inside the cracks in my memory. He carries the guilt. Let him bleed the truth. Suddenly my legs gave out. I dropped to my knees, breath stolen. Images filled my mind. Me, years ago, standing over a boy in handcuffs, shouting, gripping him too hard. The mother begging, the father yelling. I'd buried the report. The town had forgiven. I hadn't. More followed. Flashes of choices I'd made, people I'd ignored, pain I'd justified with a badge and silence. I screamed, but no sound came out. Only blood dripping from my mouth onto the forest floor. The girl walked toward me, extending the book. The page turned, and it showed me what was coming next. The next page wasn't blank. It held an illustration, drawn in sharp, ink-black lines like an old woodcut print. The scene showed me, kneeling exactly as I was now, mouth open, blood pooling beneath my chin. Behind me stood the girl, and behind her, something far worse. A shape, massive, faceless, made of coiling limbs and open mouths stitched shut with barbed wire. Its spine arched over the trees like a canopy. Wherever it touched the earth, the ground split like cracked glass. As I stared, the ink bled off the page and onto the soil. Reality twisted. I could smell it before I saw it, like rotten leaves soaked in bile and rusted metal. The trees groaned and bent as if pulled toward the shape forming behind the girl. The townsfolk dropped to their knees and began to chant, low, guttural syllables. Not English, not anything human. Jael et Koren. Jael et Koren. The girl reached into the book again, retrieving something. A deputy's badge. Mine. Not the one I wore now, the one I'd tossed in a box years ago after I quit. Burned around the edges, blood still crusted along the rim. She placed it on the ground in front of me, as though returning an offering. You left, she said, voice hollow, but we never forgot. Her eyes locked onto mine. We remember everything, Deputy. And then she began to weep. Not tears. Ash. It poured from her eyes, streaking down her cheeks, turning the badge black. I reached for her. The moment my fingers touched hers, pain surged through me like lightning. My vision blurred. My skin began to smoke. The book flipped again. A new page. This one said, "Confess." And the ground beneath us opened. I fell. Not through air, but memory. It was like dropping into an ocean of my own past, where every moment I wanted to forget clung to me like oil. I saw myself, badge polished, smile fake, walking past the cries of the drunk, unholding. I saw a bruised woman turning away as I looked the other way. I saw the boy from years ago, Tommy, the one I arrested too hard, too fast. I never asked what he'd done, just followed orders. The deeper I fell, the louder the voices got. Whispers scraped at my skull. You served the law, not the people. You turned away. You let us disappear. Then I hit the bottom. It wasn't rock. It was wood. A crooked floor beneath a single flickering light bulb swinging from nothing. The room stretched in every direction, filled with desks, old police files, rusted evidence lockers. It was a mirror of the old sheriff's office, but wrong. Too quiet. Too dark. I was back in Gradage, or something pretending to be. The girl stood in the center of the room. She wasn't crying now. Her eyes were flames. You were supposed to protect us. Her voice echoed from every corner of the hollow. I tried, I whispered. My voice broke. She tilted her head. Then why did no one come? The desks burst into flame one by one, burning papers curling into ash. The heat was real, searing, but I couldn't move. My legs were rooted to the floor. One final file fluttered onto the desk before me. It bore my name. Deputy Thomas Reed. Inside was a single photograph, me standing beside the mayor, while smoke rose in the background. I didn't remember it being taken, but the fire behind us was the orphanage. The photograph trembled in my hand, the heat from the burning desks lapping at its edges. I should have dropped it, but I couldn't. My eyes locked on the image like it was alive, whispering something just beyond hearing. The orphanage had burned down 22 years ago. That much I remembered. What I didn't remember was standing there while it did. I tore my eyes from the photo, backing away. That's not real, I muttered. I wasn't even... You were there, the girl said softly. The walls behind her cracked open like old bones. Black vines snaked through the gaps, pulsing like veins. The light bulb above us flickered and burst. Total darkness swallowed everything, except her. She glowed with a cold fire, flickering like a candle in a sealed tomb. You made yourself forget, she continued. They gave you that power. But forgetting doesn't mean you're innocent. The file burst into flames. Screams erupted from the floorboards. Children's voices, high, panicked, begging. Help us! They locked us in. It hurts. It hurts. I fell to my knees, hands over my ears, but the voices crawled inside my head like insects. I didn't know, I screamed. I didn't know they were still inside. The girl approached slowly, her steps silent, her eyes glowing like burning coals. No one left, she said. They said it was an accident. They said the storm knocked out the power. But you smelled the smoke. You heard the screams. She knelt beside me, and you turned away. Something behind her began to rise, massive, shadowed, skeletal. It reached for me. Then the floor collapsed again, and I plunged through a burning memory of my own silence. I landed hard, flat on my back. Not in fire, not in darkness. This time it was snow. Thick, endless snow covering everything, except the gallows. They stood in a perfect circle, 21 in total. Old wooden scaffolds. D's, nooses swaying in windless air. At the center was a tall stone chair. A figure sat on it, immense, draped in robes that bled into the ground like smoke. It had no face, just skin stretched taut where eyes and mouth should be. But I could feel it watching me, judging. I tried to rise, but my limbs were heavy, cold rooted deep in my bones. My breath fogged the air, but even that seemed to freeze mid-exhale, hanging like suspended guilt. One by one, the nooses began to creak. And from the snow, shadows emerged. People, townsfolk, all of them. Mayor Greeley, Father Harlan, Ellen from the diner, children, strangers, all dead. Their skin cracked, frostbitten, eyes hollow, yet somehow they still looked at me. You forgot us, they said in chorus. No, I whispered, shaking my head. I buried you. I went to the funerals. Did you ask why we died? I couldn't answer. The eyeless judge raised a skeletal hand. The gallows groaned. Each noose lifted high, ropes tightening around invisible necks. Stop! I shouted, stumbling forward. I tried to stop it. I just didn't know how. You chose silence, the voice said. Not from any one figure, but all of them, united. And silence, they echoed, is a verdict. Suddenly, I was standing on one of the platforms. A noose dangled before me, swaying, waiting. The judge raised his hand again. The platform beneath my feet began to tremble. Then, a bell rang in the distance. Low, hollow, calling me back. The ringing didn't stop. It pulled me like a rope around the chest, yanking me up and out of the snow, out of the gallows, out of that cold courtroom of ghosts. I jolted upright, gasping, soaked in sweat and grime, sprawled on the floor of what looked like the old town chapel. The bell was still ringing, slow, deliberate, dong, dong. The chapel was decayed and warped, its wooden beams blackened with mold. Moonlight filtered in through shattered stained glass, painting the floor in fractured colors. The pews were overturned. The altar was gone. Only the bell rope remained, swinging on its own. Dong. I rose unsteadily, eyes drawn toward the ladder leading up into the bell tower. Each step groaned under my weight. The higher I climbed, the colder it got until I could see my breath again. At the top, I found the bell, but it wasn't moving. The rope hung limp, and still, the ringing echoed through my skull. Then I saw her, the little girl, standing beside the bell, no longer ghostly, more solid, more real. Her eyes were hollow, but focused. "You're almost ready," she said. "Ready for what?" I rasped, my voice hoarse. "To remember." I stepped closer. Her hands were clutching something. An old deputy badge. Mine. Scratched, blackened, and cold to the touch. She held it out to me. "When you take this, it all comes back. I don't want it. You have to." I reached for it, hand shaking. The second I touched it, pain exploded behind my eyes. Images, voices, fire, blood. I saw the town. I saw the thing beneath it. I saw what we did to keep it asleep. We fed it. And then, we vanished. The bell let out one final chime. Everything went black. I woke in the sheriff's office, but not how I remembered it. Everything was pristine, no dust, no rot. The clock on the wall ticked cleanly, its hands frozen at 3:33 a.m. The air smelled of fresh coffee and cigar. Retty smoke. My uniform hung neatly on the coat rack. The desk was stacked with folders labeled "Missing Person," "Closed," and across from me sat Sheriff Briggs. He looked alive, younger, sharper, just like the day he asked me to help clean up after the first disappearance. "You remember now, don't you?" he said, lighting a cigarette. "We didn't lose the town. We gave it away." "No," I whispered, but the memories poured in. The earthquakes, the dying crops, the disappearances, and then the discovery. Something deep beneath the earth, older than any god, buried beneath Raven's roost. It hungered, and we fed it. One life, every 3 months, chosen quietly, buried without a word. "Peace had a price," Briggs said calmly. "You agreed. We all did. I was scared. I was young. You lied. We survived. Until the day we didn't. Because something broke the cycle. I remembered the last offering, little Elsie McCrae. But she never made it to the pit. Someone stopped it. Someone screamed too loud. The ritual failed. And the town paid. I didn't stop it," I muttered. "But someone did." Briggs crushed his cigarette. "You're not just remembering. You're returning." "Returning where?" "To the dead." The walls of the office began to warp, the floorboards groaning like timber on a sinking ship. "You were the last one left," Briggs said. "The only one who could reset it." The room darkened. My badge burned against my chest. "Make the pact again," he whispered. And then, I was alone. With a shovel. The shovel was old, the wooden handle splintered and cracked, but the blade had been freshly sharpened. I stood in the middle of an open field just beyond the town's edge. The fog had thickened around me, dense and suffocating, swirling as if something alive moved through it. There were no stars above, no sound, only the low hum of the earth beneath my boots. The ground pulsed beneath me. It knew I was there. I didn't want to dig, but my hands moved on their own. The first thrust into the frozen dirt sent a shiver through my bones. My breath clouded in the air, thick and ragged. Each scoop came harder than the last. I didn't know what I was digging for. A body, the truth, redemption, or maybe a doorway. After a dozen strokes, the soil changed, damp and dark, smelling of rot and rusted iron. The deeper I went, the stronger the scent grew. Something fetid and familiar, the scent of the pit. Then, I hit something. It wasn't a coffin. It was stone, carved, black as pitch. Symbols covered its surface, writhing, spidery things that shifted when I blinked. My head throbbed, my vision blurred. And then a whisper, not from behind me or above, but inside. You remember the deal. You remember the hunger. I dropped to my knees, touching the stone. A jolt of heat surged through me, searing my veins. The ground around me cracked. One life, one soul, just one. And the town returns. No, I choked. I can't. Then remain here, forever, between the breath and the dirt, forgotten, alone. Behind me, footsteps crunched in the frost. I turned slowly. A silhouette stood in the fog, breathing, alive, watching. The offering had come to me. The figure emerged slowly from the fog, each step deliberate, boots sinking into the damp soil I'd unearthed. He was tall, lean, wrapped in an oilskin duster blackened by time and rain. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but his eyes glowed faintly red like dying coals, not human, but not entirely other either. I took a step back. My hand moved instinctively to my holster, but my gun was gone. I hadn't worn it since Raven's roost vanished. "You've come far," the man said, voice like gravel dragging across ice. "Far enough to be given a choice." "I didn't ask for one," I said, heart pounding. He tilted his head. "Doesn't matter. The hole's been dug. The pact can be mended. All that's left is the sacrifice." He gestured to the stone slab in the pit. I glanced down. The symbols were now glowing, pulsing softly in rhythm with my heartbeat. "One soul," I said, barely a whisper. "You're here to take it?" "No," he said. "I'm here to see what you'll offer, yours or theirs." Behind him, the fog parted slightly. A child stood there, barefoot, shivering. It was Elsie McCrae. But not. Her eyes were empty, her skin waxy. She smiled too wide, her teeth sharp and shining. "I thought she was dead," I murmured. "She was," the man replied. "Now she waits to be avenged, or returned." The wind howled suddenly, scattering dead leaves across the field. The earth trembled again. My hands trembled too. The rules were clear. One life, one town. But whose? Elsie took a step toward the pit. I had to choose. The stone slab cracked open, and the darkness beneath it began to breathe. I stared into the opening in the earth, that carved black slab now split like a mouth yawning wide, breathing in fog, breathing out something older than rot. The sound wasn't wind anymore. It was whispering, not in words, but in memories. Screams, church bells, blood on snow. The town, my fault. Elsie stepped closer to the edge, her eyes fixed on mine. She wasn't trembling. She looked willing. Her smile was hollow. The thing in her skin wore the shape of a child, but it wasn't her. Not anymore. "She's already dead," I muttered. "She's in between," the stranger replied. "A vessel, an echo. If she goes willingly, the pact is clean. The town returns. The people wake. And if I go instead," he raised an eyebrow, "then the town stays gone. But your name, your guilt, dies with you." The whispers rose, frantic, hungry. The pit pulsed with red light now, and I could feel heat on my skin. It wanted a soul. Now. Elsie looked up at me, and for a split second, her smile vanished. just a flicker of the real girl I remembered, lost, begging. "Don't make me choose," I whispered. "You already have," the man said. Elsie's foot slipped on the loose earth. She teetered at the edge. I lunged forward, catching her wrist just as she started to fall. Her skin was cold as ice, her eyes locked on mine. "Let me go," she said, voice not hers. "No." I pulled her back, cradled her against me. "I go," I said, turning to the man. "Not her." The whispers stopped, the pit groaned, and then he smiled. "For once," he said, "someone remembers what it means to be human." The ground swallowed me whole. Falling didn't feel like falling. It felt like being erased. I was pulled into blackness so complete it snuffed out thought. My breath caught somewhere between my lungs and the void. No wind, no gravity, no time, just memory. I saw my badge, tarnished, saw Sheriff Call, Inns laughing over coffee in the old station. He was screaming now. I saw Ruthie Thompson, who disappeared in '87, saw her eyes sewn shut. I saw the townsfolk of Raven's Roost, frozen mid-movement, mouths open in silent screams, caught in a moment that had never ended. And then I saw myself, standing over the pit, watching me fall. No, not just watching, smiling. I crashed into a floor that wasn't there and was suddenly standing, knees weak, breath ragged. The space around me flickered, walls of bone and stone and things that pulsed like they were alive. It reeked of sulfur and wet fur. The stranger was there, waiting. "You chose sacrifice," he said, "but did you understand what that means?" "I die. The town lives," I answered. He laughed, a low, rattling sound. "You don't die," he said. "You remain. You keep them safe." Behind him, shapes stirred in the dark, eyes glowing, limbs too long, teeth clacking in hunger. "The roost was built atop a threshold," he continued. "Every 100 years, a guardian must be chosen. The town forgot. Let the pact rot. So it was taken." He handed me a lantern. Its flame was cold blue, and inside it I saw the faces of everyone I loved. "You remember. That's enough." A door opened behind him, carved in flesh and flame. "If you fail, they'll return." "What are they?" I asked. He smiled. "They were what came before names." And then he was gone. I stepped through the door, gripping the lantern like it was the only real thing in this impossible place. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world shifted. I was back in Raven's Roost, but not the one I knew. It was twilight, perpetual twilight. The town was frozen in a moment, mid-breath. Leaves hung motionless in the air. Smoke curled but didn't rise. The bell above the church hovered mid-ring. I walked past the general store. Mr. Halder stood behind the counter, but his eyes didn't blink. A single tear, suspended on his cheek, shimmered like glass. They were here, but not alive, not gone either. The lantern flickered. As I passed, the flame flared blue and bathed them in light. Slowly, color bled back into their cheeks. Their eyes blinked, their breath caught. Then they went still again, not awake, not asleep, trapped. I realized then, I was the heartbeat. The flame kept them tethered, and if I faltered, something moved on the edge of town. A long-limbed thing with no face. It skulked along the tree line, sniffing the air, its black form oozing between pine trunks like oil. The lantern dimmed. It turned and smiled. They were watching, waiting for weakness, a moment when I'd drop my guard or forget the cost. I set the lantern on the ground and drew my pistol, pointless maybe, but familiar. I'd never stop all of them, but I could stall, give the people another day of rest. That was my role now, not hero, not martyr, caretaker, watcher. A voice echoed through the stillness, not from outside, but inside me. Remember them. That is how you keep the dark out. I stood tall, lantern in hand, eyes on the trees. The dark could wait. The trees whispered my name. Not like voices in the wind. No. This was sharper, more deliberate, as though something old had learned to speak, and it was practicing on me. Raymond. Ray. Deputy. I stood on the edge of town, lantern burning cold and steady. The creature had vanished into the woods, but I could feel its kin watching, circling, waiting for their moment. At my feet, the earth trembled like a heartbeat, a rhythm I could almost follow. 3 slow thumps, then silence. It returned every hour. A reminder, the packed lives. I walked the perimeter of the roost now, each night tracing the old iron fence that still ran crooked through the brush. When I passed, it sparked, tiny blue sparks like fireflies flitting off the metal. I guessed it still held some of the old power. If I stopped walking, the heartbeat grew louder. If I stopped walking, the whispers grew clearer. They told me things about what lay beneath the town, about the things buried before language, before light, about what they'd done to the last caretaker. It wasn't death that frightened me, it was eternity. One night, I passed the schoolhouse. Miss Lottie's chalkboard still had a lesson scrawled across it. Long division. Her ghost stood in front of the board, mouthing words I couldn't hear. I shined the lantern on her. She looked at me, blinked, and whispered, "They dream, Ray, but they're not alone in those dreams." Then she vanished again. Back to stasis. Back to safety. I kept walking, kept whispering names to the flame. As long as I remembered them, they stayed. As long as I remembered myself, I stayed. But something deep in the woods had started whispering back, and it remembered me too. It happened on the 27th night. The perimeter held, but barely. The lantern's flame had grown weaker, dimmer. I fed it oil and memory, names spoken aloud, old keepsakes left at doorsteps, but it flickered like a dying star. That night, I saw something that made my stomach knot. Footprints. Human, but not mine. Too small to be mine, too deep to be real. They led from the tree line, crossed the church steps, and vanished near the old well in the center of town. I followed them, lantern in hand. The well had been dry since '82. Now it hummed. Not water, not wind, something older. I leaned over the edge, holding the lantern low. The flame pulsed and went out. Darkness swallowed the town. Instant, total. I froze. Then I heard breathing. Ragged, wet, close. I raised my pistol. My hands shook. I couldn't see a thing, not even my own fingers. But I knew whatever had come through the breach was beside me now. It whispered in my ear. "You stopped walking." I fired blindly. The muzzle flash lit up the face. It wore my badge. It wore my face. But the eyes were hollow, black pits leaking something thicker than shadow. It smiled. The world tilted. I found myself on the ground, gasping, heart racing like a trapped animal. The lantern flickered back to life beside me, barely a candle's glow. The figure was gone, but it had left something behind. A second lantern. Black iron. No flame inside. Just swirling darkness, thick and oily, sloshing like it had weight. I didn't touch it, but it pulsed, in time with my heartbeat. Whatever was in that well hadn't just escaped. It had given me a choice, light or shadow. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my own face grinning back at me, empty-eyed, wet-mouthed, whispering through broken teeth. The black lantern sat on my kitchen table. I'd wrapped it in burlap, and buried it under a pile of salt, then locked it in a chest. Still, I could feel it pulsing through the walls, syncing with my heartbeat like some perverse metronome. I tried to burn it, wouldn't catch. I tried to bury it. The ground spat it back up. At dawn, I sat across from it again. The regular lantern, my old one, barely glowed now, its flame struggling. But the black lantern, it shimmered, like something alive stirred just beneath the glass. I made coffee with shaking hands and watched the frost creep across the windows from the inside. Then came the knock. I hadn't heard another knock since the town vanished. Slow, heavy, 3 times. I opened the door. Nobody was there. Only footprints in the snow. Small, barefoot, leading toward the trees. At the edge of the yard stood a little girl. Couldn't be more than 8 years old. Dark hair, pale face, no coat. Her eyes were wrong, like something was watching from deep behind them. She pointed at the black lantern. "They want it," she said. I stepped forward. "Who?" She didn't blink. "You know." Then she turned and walked into the woods. I stood there, the cold biting into my skin, and knew I had two choices: follow her and face whatever waited in that darkness, or stay and let the black lantern grow. I chose the woods. I took the lantern with me, and the snow began to fall in reverse. The woods behind the town had always felt old, but that morning they felt ancient, like something was remembering me as I walked. The girl was gone. No footprints in the snow, no trail to follow, just dense pine, heavy silence, and that damn black lantern swaying in my hand like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The deeper I went, the less the world made sense. Branches grew upside down. Trees leaned away from me, groaning like they didn't want me near. I passed a deer skull nailed to a trunk, its eye sockets stuffed with writhing centipedes. Something whispered my name from inside it. I didn't stop. After what felt like hours, I came to a clearing I didn't recognize, but my body did. It shivered. Every hair on my arm stood straight up. The black lantern's pulse quickened. I felt it tugging forward, like it had roots in the soil. In the center of the clearing was a mirror. 7 feet tall, framed in rotting wood. No reflection, just smoke swirling behind the glass. Then I heard them. Voices. All of them. The sheriff, my brother, townsfolk I'd buried, calling me, begging me, pleading for light. Their hands pressed against the inside of the mirror, stretching the surface like skin. Some bled, others just stared. One voice cut through them all. Mine. "You brought it. Good." I dropped the lantern. It landed with a sickening thud, like flesh. The glass cracked. Something moved inside. A long, pale arm reached through. Clawed fingers scraped the forest floor. Then another. I couldn't run. Behind me, the trees had closed. The black lantern rolled toward the mirror, and the forest exhaled. The arms that reached through the mirror weren't just pale, they were hollow. I could see the seams, thin, wrinkled folds like rotting paper dolls. They moved wrong, too, glitching forward in jagged bursts as if something was yanking them on strings from the other side. Day. The smoke inside the mirror churned faster, thickening into a storm. Then came the face. Not a creature, a shape, an outline of me. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, and inside it I saw the town, my town, still standing, frozen in twilight. People walked in slow motion, eyes vacant, limbs stiff. Every building shimmered like it was underwater. I saw myself there too, standing behind the station desk, grinning. The false me locked eyes with me through the mirror. "You left us," it said, but it wasn't speaking aloud. It was inside my head. I stepped back. The black lantern pulsed like a heartbeat gone rabid. It trembled, split at the base. A viscous black fluid leaked from it and seeped into the ground. The soil hissed, steamed, turned gray. I turned to run. The trees wouldn't let me. Branches reached out, twisting around my arms and legs. They weren't bark anymore. They were bone. Human fingers, hundreds of them, clinging to my skin. The mirror shuddered violently. Then something stepped through. It wasn't me, not exactly. It wore my face like a mask, but the body was all wrong. Too tall, too thin, neck craning like it didn't know how bones worked. It smiled with teeth that clinked like glass. The forest fell completely silent. "You're not real," I said, heart pounding. The thing tilted its head. "Aren't I?" And then it lunged. It hit me like a freight train. We crashed into the dirt, and I felt its bones, or what passed for them, shift beneath stretched skin. Cold, hollow, brittle, like it was wearing a costume of me. Its hands grabbed my throat, and where it touched, my skin burned. Not hot, but cold, like frostbite spreading from the inside. I punched it in the face, my own face, its nose crumpled inward like wet paper. No blood, just smoke. It smiled wider. "You were always supposed to stay," it whispered. "But you ran. You left the door open." The clearing groaned. The mirror behind us cracked again, fissures spidering outward. A sound like weeping echoed from it, hundreds of voices layered, dissolving into static. I reached for the black lantern. It had split entirely open now. A glowing core pulsed inside, beating like a heart. Black tendrils of smoke coiled from it, reaching into the trees, into the mirror, into me. "Light it," the thing said, still smiling. "That's why you brought it, right?" I hesitated. "You want answers," it hissed. "You want them back. But it costs. It always costs." The branches tightened around my limbs. I grabbed the core with both hands. Pain exploded through my skull. Images slammed into my vision. Too fast, too many. The town before it vanished. The ritual. Sheriff Griggs kneeling. Blood on the altar. A name whispered over and over. Eidolon. I saw myself, leading them to the woods. I saw the truth. I had been the first to forget. The core pulsed harder. I could barely hold it now. "Finish it," my double growled. "Or become part of it." I screamed and jammed the core into its chest. The thing, my reflection, my shadow, whatever it was, let out a shriek so sharp it fractured the air. Its mouth split sideways, then upward, until the face peeled open like torn canvas. Smoke poured out in violent jets. The trees screamed with it. The ground buckled beneath us, roots twisted up, writhing like snakes, trying to reclaim what had escaped. But the core I jammed into its chest began to glow brighter, pulsing faster than before. Light, pure, searing white, spread outward like fire, chasing the darkness. Wherever it touched the tendrils, they shriveled and hissed, burning away to nothing. The mirror shattered, not just cracked, obliterated. Glass shards flew into the air, frozen mid-flight, suspended like stars. Inside each fragment, I saw the townsfolk. Mrs. Callahan at the diner, the boy from the gas station, Sheriff Griggs, even poor Levi. All of them caught in some terrible loop, eyes wide, expressions vacant. One by one, the fragments blinked out, erased. The creature stumbled back, black liquid pouring from its chest, its form unraveling like ash in the wind. "You broke it," it rasped. "You were meant to stay." I stepped forward, bleeding, exhausted, shaking. "No," I said. "I was meant to remember." The clearing lit up, blinding. Then silence. The smoke evaporated. The trees turned to ordinary pines once more. I stood alone. The black lantern lay in the dirt, cracked, empty, dead. And behind me, where the mirror had been, was only forest now. No portal, no town. No shadows. But something told me the price hadn't been paid in full. Not yet. I turned to leave. Every step felt heavier than the last. Somewhere behind me, the wind whispered my name. And I didn't dare look back. It's been a year. I don't talk about what happened, not to friends, not to doctors, not even in the long, sleepless nights when the wind outside my cabin sounds like it's breathing. They'd never believe me. Hell, I barely believe it myself. But I know it happened. I carry the scars, real ones, and the kind that live behind the eyes. I wake up some nights with dirt under my nails, pine needles in my bed. Once, I found the broken handle of the lantern on my porch. I burned it. It didn't melt. The town of Briar Glen, still gone. No record, no satellite images, not even a footnote in the county archive, like it was never there. But I remember. I remember Levi's smile, the way the sheriff used to light his pipe, the old man at the hardware store who gave kids candy when no one was looking. They're all echoes now. Sometimes I hear them, soft voices in the trees when I walk too far from the cabin. A radio crackling with static in the distance. The jingle of the gas station bell. Once, I swear I saw someone standing just beyond the tree line watching me, looked just like me, smiling. I haven't been back to that clearing. I know better now. Doors can close, but cracks remain. Mirrors can break, but they still reflect. The truth is, I was part of it. Maybe I still am. I used to be a deputy in Montana. I thought I'd seen everything. But you don't forget the day an entire town vanishes, even if the world does, especially when the shadows still know your name, and they're just waiting for you to open that door again.